Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Hello once again. For today's video, I will be discussing the fingerprint classification system, which is actually the Henry classification system that was modified by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This video series will cover the following topics. And part 1, I will be discussing the blocking out. Part 2 will cover the primary classification. Part 3 of the video series will be on secondary classification. Part 4 will be on the sub-secondary classification. Part 5 will be the major classification. Part 6 will be on final classification. And Part 7 will be on the key classification. Fingerprint classification is the making of fingerprint classification formula, which was derived from the complete set of 10 fingerprints. So these are the arrangement of the fingerprint record into groups and subgroups. Now, the making of fingerprint classification formula is done in order to be utilized in storing or arrangement of a fingerprint card as a part of a record. So in other words, fingerprint classification is used for filing purposes for easy retrieval. To give you a short background with regards to the fingerprint classification, in 1896, Sir Edward Richard Henry developed a fingerprint classification system that uses all the fingerprints. So it is considered as or named as the Henry classification, or otherwise known as the 10-digit fingerprint system. And this classification system was actually originally consisting of 4 parts. We have there the primary, and then followed by the secondary, and then the sub-secondary, and last is the final division or final classification. However, later when 1 million prints got registered, this classification system by Henry became complex and inefficient to manage because of the numbers of registered prints. So the complexity and inefficiency of the Henry system due to the increasing number of prints being registered, the system were then covered by the FBI or the Federal Bureau of Investigation through modification. So it was then named now or known as the Henry Fingerprint Classification System, modified by the FBI. So it was later added with the key classification and then the major classification, and actually even the second sub-secondary classification. So hence, because of that, it is now commonly called as the Henry FBI classification system. Now, take note that the second sub-secondary division or second sub-secondary classification is an additional classification that is rarely used for classifying the fingerprint in Henry classification. That's why I will not be including this in our video series. Before anything else with blocking out, let us all be familiarized with the content of the fingerprint card. Of course, we have here this part will cover the information about the suspect, or the person from which the fingerprint will be taken. And we also have here this part is our rolled impressions, since the fingers will be rolled from left to right, and this part will be the plain impression. So this rolled impression, this 10 fingerprint patterns will be the subject for blocking out, or it will be the subject of the fingerprint classification system. So rolled impressions are taken from the 10 fingers. So on the upper portion, it will be taken from the right fingers, and then on the lower portion is taken from the left fingers. Now on this particular part, this is intended for the left 4 fingers, which are taken simultaneously, and then this part will be the left thumb, and this is intended for the right thumb, and this particular part is intended for the right 4 fingers taken simultaneously. Again, the coverage of the fingerprint classification is on the rolled impression. Since this will be the coverage or the focus of the fingerprint classification, this will be intended for the block 1, which is the right thumb. Block 2 is for the right index, and then block 3 is for the right middle finger. Block 4 is for the right ring finger. Block 5 is for the right little finger. Block 6 will be for the left thumb. Block 7 for the left index. Block 8 for the left middle finger. Block 9 will be the left ring finger, and block 10 will be the left little finger. So these blocks, or these 10 blocks, will now be the focus of the Henry classification system, or known as the number. So the Henry classification number that we are referring to is actually refers to the classification formula. And this formula, you have here an example. This is an example of the classification formula. These numbers will be the one that will be placed in this particular part of the fingerprint card. To begin with, let us be familiarized first with the classification formula under the Henry FBI classification system. So here is the sequence in the classification formula. So first is we have here the key classification or the key division, followed by the major classification or the major division, and then followed by the primary classification, and then followed by the secondary, and then the fifth is the subsecondary, and the last is the final classification or the final division. So this is an example of the classification. So to continue with our classification formula, if you're looking at this particular line, this is termed as the classification line. Now, on the upper portion of the classification line, we termed it as the numerator, and on the lower portion of the classification line, we term it as the denominator. Now, if you are going to observe on the key classification or key division, it only involves the numerator here. In the major here, the primary, secondary, and subsecondary, if you are going to observe, it involves the numerator and the denominator. Unlike in the final classification, it could either be on the numerator or on the denominator. So on our video, it will be explained under the final why is it that it could either be in the numerator or in the denominator under the final classification or final division. Familiarize with the sequence in the classification formula. So first is we have there the key. So below is an example, and then followed by major, and then third is the primary, followed by the secondary, and then the subsecondary, and last on our classification formula is the final classification or final division. However, class, in the classification, this first step is the blocking out, again, followed by the primary classification. Third is secondary classification, followed by the subsecondary classification, and then the major classification, followed by the final classification, and last is the key classification. So please do not be confused between the sequence in the classification formula and the steps in classification. So again, in the steps, first is we have there the primary, followed by the secondary, followed by the subsecondary. So we have here subsecondary, and then followed by the major classification, and then followed by the final classification. These are the steps, and last is the key classification. There. So finally, we are now on the blocking out. So when we talk about blocking out, this is the placing on a fingerprint card the result of the interpretation of the 10 patterns from the fingerprint card. So if this is our fingerprint card, we are going to place interpretation. So what are those interpretations? So we are going to identify what kind of fingerprint patterns are these fingerprints present in the fingerprint card. So we are going to use letters, symbols, or numbers. So there are actually required letters, symbols, or numbers which will be placed in each fingerprint block. So for example, in this illustration, we can see these letters, we can see also these symbols here, and we can see numbers. So to begin with the steps in blocking out, first is we need to identify or interpret the fingerprint patterns. So this will now be the challenge. You must be familiarized with the different elements of the fingerprint patterns. Again, to review, the fingerprint patterns is we have there the plain arch, we have there the tented arch, we have there the radial loop, ulnar loop, and then the plain whorl, the central pocket loop whorl, and then we have there the double loop whorl and the accidental whorl. So those are the fingerprint patterns that we are going to identify if it is present in our fingerprint card. And then followed by the placing of the interpretation that we have made. So what are those interpretations? We are going to use the letters, just like this illustrated examples. We have here the letters, and then we are going also to place symbols that are required. Now, what are these required symbols or letters in the blocking out? For the index fingers, or the right index and left index finger, or known as the fingerprint block 2 and fingerprint block 7. If it is a plain arch, use the letter A. And then if that will be a tented arch, use letter T. And then letter R for the radial loop. And then letter U for the ulnar loop. And W for all whirl patterns. So take note for all whirl patterns. Just remember the acronym ATRO here. So these are the required letters or symbols. Take note for index fingers. In some other authors or references or fingerprint practitioners, instead of the acronym ATRO, they also use the letters C for the central pocket loop whirl. They also use the D for the double loop whirl. And we have there the X for the accidental whirl. The other authors stated that the purpose of this is to have an easy classification when we reach the secondary classification or division. So I repeat, in some other authors, they utilize this ATRO CDX for the index fingers. But in our discussion, we are going only to use the acronym ATRO, wherein A stands for the plain arch, T for tented, R for radial loop, U for ulnar loop, and W for all whirl patterns. So once again, remember this acronym. These are intended for the index finger or the right index and the left index fingers or the fingerprint block 2 and block 7. Take note that in the blocking out, the use letters should be all capitalized. So based on our example here, we have here a capital letter W, which are placed on the index fingers. And take note, you should place the letters or symbols on the centermost part of the lower portion of the fingerprint pattern. So in this particular part. Next is on the other fingerprint blocks. So this involves other fingerprints except for the index finger, since we already discussed the required letters or symbols for the index finger. Now in other fingerprint blocks, we are going to use the ATW and these symbols. Okay, so for the plain arch, we are going to still use letter A. For tented arch, we are going to use the capital letter T. For the radial loop, if it is taken from the, or if it is in the right fingers, we are going to use the forward slant. Now if it is an ulnar loop, if it is taken from the right fingers, you will use, or we will use the back slant here. Now if it is a radial loop taken from the left fingers, we are going to use the back slant. And then if that is an ulnar loop taken from the left fingers, we are going to use the forward slant. Now the same class that in the other whirl patterns, we are going to use the capital letter W. So again, this is intended for the other fingerprint blocks except the index finger. So if you are going to observe here, we have here the letter W for whirl pattern, and then we have here the back slant. Here we have here the back slant, and then we also have here the forward slant there for the loop patterns. So let us now proceed with the step 3 in blocking out. this step 3 is the placing the result of the ridge counting or the ridge tracing. So of course, if that is a loop pattern, we need to identify the ridge count, and then we are going to place the ridge count on the upper right corner of the fingerprint blocks. And of course, if that is a whirl pattern, we need also to indicate the result of the ridge tracing, which is placed on the upper right corner of the fingerprint blocks. So for example here, so we have here the since this is a whirl pattern on the first fingerprint block, and this is a meeting whirl, so we are going to put the symbol letter M. Now on the second block, since this is again a whirl pattern, since this is inner, we are going to place the required symbol, which is the I, equivalent to inner. And then if this is a loop pattern, so in this scenario, this is a radial loop, we need to identify the ridge count and just place the ridge count, the number of ridge count on this particular part on the upper right corner. And then on the fourth block, again this is a loop, we are going to place the result of the ridge count. Now for the tented arch or the plain arch, we will just leave it blank. So if you're going to observe on the block 5, we do not have any letters or symbols for that, or letters. And on the block 6, we have there a loop pattern. Again, we need to place there the ridge count or the result of the ridge count. And of course, we have there a plain arch on the block 7. Since this is a plain arch, we will just leave it blank. And then block 8, we have there tented, leave it blank. And then block 9, we have there a whirl pattern. So we are going to place again the result of ridge tracing. In this example, we have there an outer loop, an outer whirl. So we are going to place there the letter O. And of course, we have there the loop pattern on the 10th block. We are going to place the ridge count. So these are the required letters or numbers in blocking out under the step 3. So we have here another example to be more clear with blocking out. So again, first is we need to identify first the interpretation, or we are going to interpret the index fingers first. So first is we have there the right index finger. So this is a whirl pattern, so we are going to put letter W. And on the left index finger, since this is a tented, we are going to put letter T. And then we will now proceed with other fingers. So we have here the black one. This is an ulnar loop. So we are going to put backslash. And then the third is we have there a double loop whirl. So we are going to put letter W. And then next is on the fourth block, we have there a tented arch. So we are going to put letter E. On the fifth block, we have there an ulnar loop. So we are going to place there a backslash. And then next is on the sixth block, we have there a plain arch. So we are going to place there letter A, capital letter A. And then on the 8th block, since this is a whirl pattern, we are going to place there letter W. And then next is on the 9th block, we have there a radial loop. So since it is taken from the left finger, we are going to use backslash. And then of course on the block 10, this is an ulnar loop taken from the left little finger, so we are going to use a forward slash. Okay, so we are done with the first and second step of blocking out. Let us now proceed with the step 3 of the blocking out, or the last step. Of course, on the block 1, since this is a loop pattern, we are going to ridge count. So we are now going to place on the upper right corner the result of ridge counting. So we have there 13. Second block is we have there a word pattern. We are going to interpret whether or not if that is an inner, meeting, or outer. So in this example, it is outer. So we are going to place there letter O. And then the third block, we have there a double loop. So we are going to identify the ridge tracing. So that is an inner. So we are going to put an I. And then tented, just leave it blank. And then block 5, we have there a loop pattern. Again, we are going to ridge count. So we are going to place there the result of ridge count. We have there 12 ridge count. Next is on the block 6. Since it is a plain arch, we are just going to leave it blank. And then block 7, it is a tented arch. So we are going to leave it blank. And then next is block 8. This is a word pattern. So we are going to ridge trace. So if we are going to observe, this is actually a meeting word. So we are going to put letter M. And of course on the block 9, so this is a loop pattern. Again, we are going to place the result of the ridge count. So we have there 13 ridge count. And the last block, or the 10th block, we have there a loop pattern, the same. We are going to ridge count. So we have there 7 ridge count. So this is now the result of the blocking out. So that's it. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have learned from this video, and I hope you will also watch the next video of this Henry classification video series. Thank you for watching.